Hello everyone, welcome back. It's really good to be here with you. Today I'm going to start off with a question I received from a friend of mine regarding champagne. The question really was, I didn't know this was wine, how come it has its own category? Great question. Let's start with some very general categories of wine that people normally think of. If you ask somebody, hey, what kind of wine do you like? They might say, oh, I really like red wines, or I really like white wines, or whatever. More specifically, might say, hey, I really enjoy Merlots or Cabernet Sauvignon. I might enjoy Chardonnay, I might enjoy Pinot Gris, whatever. Those are more specific types of reds and whites. However, when people say they enjoy champagne, that's an odd one because champagne really is one of those specific, almost name brand things, if you will, that people use to describe an entire category. For example, about most of you will say you're using a Kleenex or a Q-tip instead of saying I'm using a tissue or a cotton swab. Even if you're not using those specific brands, you'll still refer to them by the brand names. Champagne has turned into one of those things. So let's talk specifically about what champagne is right now. Champagne only comes from a very specific region in France. Matter of fact, the northwest corner of France is where it's made. It has to be made, grown, fermented, bottled, labeled, everything in that region. If you go more than 100 miles away, by law, it cannot be labeled as champagne. Much of that might not be news to you, but I'll bet this next part really is. Champagne also can only use certain types of grapes. There are really 7 types that are allowed to be used at all, but there's 3 that are most commonly used. There's a Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, and a Pinot Meunier. Anyway, I'll put the word on here somewhere so you can see it. Anyway, those 3 grapes are the ones that can be used making champagne, or else it can't be called champagne. One more thing that makes it champagne is that it has to be made in a certain way. They call it the traditional method, or formerly they may have called it the classic method. In a nutshell, champagne has bubbles in it. They come from a secondary fermentation process. So this fermentation process is kind of labor intensive and takes a long time. Once you have your wine, say you make a wine out of Chardonnay, now we have to do the secondary process. Basically, you add some sugar and some yeast to the bottle. Then you have to leave it sit for about 15 months. Also, during that time, there's the process called riddling. No quiz, but the bottle slowly spins. And what happens is those yeasts are making CO2, they're making bubbles, but the dead yeast has to gather somewhere. So that spinning process brings it to the bottleneck to make it easier for the winemaker to yank out of the bottle. And once they've done that, you can put a little bit more sugar into it, bottle it up, and then you can call it champagne. All right, and before I go on, please, if you haven't already done so, give a little cheers, just a little cheers, like you're having a drink with it, to our subscribe button and the like button. And if you haven't done so, also ring that little bell so you'll always be notified when I come on. It's just like a little welcome to YouTube. It's like a little cheers to me through your phone or through your computer every time you see one of my videos come up. Think of that little ding as me going cheers to you. So please hit those buttons if you haven't already done so. Now, moving on. Here's an important quote for you. All champagne is sparkling wine, but not all sparkling wine is champagne, right? Sparkling wine means the bubbles. If there's no bubbles in it, we would call it still wine. Like the wine before we did the secondary fermentation, that was still wine. You add bubbles to it, just like you're making a soda, a Coke, a pop, whatever area you're from, adding bubbles to it. Similar idea here. As we said earlier, all the different requirements to make it champagne have to be in place to call it champagne, but that's actually sparkling wine. When you get away from that, you can do all sorts of other variables, such as using different types of grapes. You're not restricted to those. You can do cheaper versions of the secondary fermentation process. You could do it in a big vat altogether, which is so much easier and more cost effective for everybody involved. Also, the traditional champagne will be very dry. Once you step away from doing champagne and you want to make sparkling wine, people all over the world have had their own little twist on it. They may make it similar with their own other variations, but that means there's other flavors. There are variations in sweetness to dryness. And by the way, as an aside, if you don't know what dryness is, make sure you check out my video that I did a couple months ago on different wine jargon, right? Dry just means absence of sugar in this case. And another surprising variation are size of bubbles. That one surprised me when I learned that. So depending on what kind of sparkling wine and where it's made, you could have variations in sugar content, flavors, bubble size, and they're all amazing in their own way. Obviously, the more expensive ones people tend to use for celebrations, they tend to use for special occasions. And then people will take the least expensive ones and frequently they will put them into orange juice, make mimosas at your Sunday brunch and whatever. But obviously do what you like, drink what you like, because you know our thing here, say it with me, no wine shaming. I hope this was helpful for you. Please go try some sparkling wine, whether or not it is actually from Champagne, made in the Champagne process with the Champagne grapes. There's lots of amazing styles. I've even been to a winery in New Mexico that brought the Champagne grapes from Champagne, who made their own vineyards and made everything in the Champagne process, but they can't call it Champagne because they're not in France, they're in New Mexico. It's delicious, but there's so many great variations on it. Go try your favorite and let me know what you think. Please put any comments in the below with any questions, comments, and anything that you know about Champagne, your favorite Champagne that you want to share with us. Okay? Today I have my sparkling wine mixed with some orange juice because it's a beautiful day. I'm having a little bit of a mimosa, so thank you for coming with me today. Cheers.